Hi. How you doing?
I'm well. How's everything with you?
Pretty good, actually. It's really nice to meet you.
Have you ever found yourself genuinely concerned for an influencer having a breakdown on their Instagram story? Maybe they're crying about burnout or sharing something deeply personal, and for a moment you forget this person doesn't actually know you. Or maybe you've replied to a brand's cheeky meme or emotionally vulnerable post, almost like you were chatting with a friend. That weird little tug in your chest, that's not an accident, that's marketing. We're living in a time when the boundaries between advertising and authenticity have almost completely vanished. Brands no longer just want your money, they want your emotional investment. They want to be your quirky friend, your chaotic confidant, your virtual support system, and influencers, many of them have stopped pretending to be perfect and instead perform their relatability for clicks. Sadness, burnout, and vulnerability have become part of the content strategy. You're not just buying a product anymore, you're buying into a relationship. This isn't a glitch in the system, it is a system. What we're seeing today is the rise of the parasocial economy, a world where emotional connection is engineered for engagement and intimacy is just another marketing funnel. But this didn't just start with TikTok and Instagram. This emotional blueprint has deep roots, stretching back to the mid-century soap operas, 1950s homemaker advertising, and the commodification of women's emotional labor. Today's influencers may film in pastel bedrooms with handwritten fonts and real talk captions, but they're following a script written decades ago. In this video, we're going to unpack how we got here and what it means to live in an era where being seen, heard, and cared for often comes with a price tag. Let's explore the parasocial economy, how brands tricked us into thinking we're friends. Chapter 1, From Soap Operas to Story Times, The Origins of Emotional Marketing. Before Instagram stories, before Get Ready With Me TikToks, before parasocial relationships were even a term we used, there were soap operas. Not just the afternoon TV dramas your grandmother watched religiously, but the original radio programs of the 1930s. Long-running serialized stories that brought tales of heartbreak, betrayal, and redemption into millions of American homes. And these weren't just about entertainment, they were carefully crafted marketing vehicles. The term soap opera didn't come from the storylines, it came from the sponsors. Companies like Procter & Gamble, Colgate-Palmolive, and the Lever Brothers bankrolled these shows as a way to advertise household products like laundry detergent, dish soap, and toothpaste. The shows aired during the day, perfectly timed to reach homemakers who were cleaning, cooking, and caring for their families. As a result, the programming wasn't just adjacent to the product, it was woven into the daily rhythms of domestic life. The emotional highs and lows of the fictional characters mirror the very real emotional labor of the woman listening, building an almost subliminal intimacy between the audience and the brands. The soap wasn't just something you used, it became part of the story, part of your story. This was the birth of emotional marketing, selling through narrative, trust, and identification. Brands weren't just promising cleaner laundry, they were promising belonging, stability, and care, and it worked. These shows built massive loyalty not just for their characters, but for their sponsors. By tapping into the emotional and psychological needs of their audience, companies created a blueprint that is still being used today, only now it lives online. Fast forward to the 2020s and the same formula has gone digital. Only now the soap opera is being played out in real time on Instagram stories, YouTube vlogs, and TikTok monologues. Influencers cry on camera about personal losses, share unfiltered moments of self-doubt, and bring viewers along for everything from therapy sessions to grocery runs. Just like the early radio dramas, modern creators blend emotional with promotion. Only now the connection feels even more intimate because we're watching it unfold on the very phones we carry in our pockets. But here's the key difference. Back in the day, soap opera characters never talked back. There was a clear boundary between fiction and reality. But in today's parasocial economy, influencers do respond. They like your comments. They direct message you heart emojis. They ask how you're doing. It creates the illusion of a two-way friendship, even though the relationship is very deeply one-sided. This illusion of being reciprocal is powerful. It doesn't just sell products, it fosters emotional investment. When an influencer says, "I love you guys so much," with tears in their eyes, we don't just hear it, we feel it. This marks a transition from being passive viewers to emotionally entangled participants. In many ways, this new digital intimacy has made the parasocial blueprint more effective and more complicated than ever before. When marketing becomes a friendship and stories become sales funnels, it becomes increasingly hard to tell where genuine connection ends and brand strategy begins. Have you ever caught yourself genuinely caring about a stranger online? What made that connection for you feel so real? Chapter 2. The 1950s homemaker and the birth of intimate branding. In post-war America, the suburban homemaker wasn't just a domestic figure. She was a symbol, a cultural icon, blonde, smiling, often dressed in pastels or starch white aprons. She stood for more than just a clean home. She embodied national stability, moral virtue, and a return to normalcy after the chaos of World War II. The message was clear. America was safe again, and women were the guardians of that safety. But behind the cheerful ads and the spotless kitchens was something else, a deep undercurrent of loneliness. As men returned from war and women were pushed out of the workforce and back into the home, many found themselves isolated in sprawling suburbs, with few neighbors, no social media, and limited emotional outlets. The daily grind of child rearing, cooking, and cleaning, often without help, was emotionally exhausting. And advertisers noticed. Not only did they recognize that women controlled the majority of household spending, but they also understood the psychological gap that products alone couldn't fill. So they didn't just sell products, they sold companionship, recognition, and validation. Brands like Betty Crocker, General Mills, and Campbell's Soups crafted more than food. They created characters, personalities, and emotional relationships. Betty Crocker wasn't even a real person, but she received tens of thousands of letters a year, many addressed as if she were a trusted friend or a maternal figure. General Mills even ran radio shows where Betty would share recipes and home advice in a warm, reassuring tone, like a neighbor leaning over the backyard fence. This was the birth of feminine-coded intimacy marketing, a strategy built not just around gender, but around emotional need. These brands tapped into a very specific kind of vulnerability. The sense of homemaking was invisible, undervalued work. So they elevated the role. They celebrated women's attention to detail, their nurturing instincts, and their sacrifices not for the sake of feminism, but as a way to build brand loyalty. If a woman felt seen by the ad, she'd trust the product. If she felt celebrated by the brand, she'd buy into the identity it offered. Does this sound familiar to you? Fast forward to today's influencers on TikTok and social media, you'll see the same emotional scaffolding, only now it's repackaged for a new generation. These creators film themselves making lunch, cleaning their kitchens, or folding laundry, often with lo-fi music playing in the background. They speak in soothing tones, offering advice of self-reflection. Instead of selling a casserole, they're selling a lifestyle, a vibe, and an identity, and sometimes a sponsored face serum. What's changed is not the emotional blueprint, but the medium. Where the 1950s homemaker found solace in radio, voice, or magazine ad, the modern viewer finds connection in the candid vlog or soft-lit Instagram reel. The aesthetics are nearly identical. Warm lighting, muted color palettes, handwritten fonts, vintage filters. Everything whispers nostalgia. Everything says, "You're not alone, we see you, we're not the same." Even the rise of the soft girl or that girl aesthetic on social media can be traced back to the idealized version of domestic femininity, one that centers gentleness, order, and quiet productivity. In the 1950s, it was baking the perfect cake. Today, it's filming a 5 a.m. morning routine with collagen coffee and affirmation journaling. Different time, same script. But here's the twist. The modern content creator isn't just performing domesticity, they're monetizing it. They're packaging their routines, their vulnerabilities, their selves as content. And unlike Betty Crocker, they aren't fictional personas, they're real people even if their content is meticulously curated. The emotional intimacy is still there, but now it's transactional. You're not just watching a homemaker, you're forming a parasocial relationship with someone who appears to be just like you, but whose daily life is ultimately shaped by branding deals and algorithms. If you look at shows like Leave It to Beaver or I Love Lucy, they weren't just sitcoms, they were idealized blueprints of womanhood, meticulously framed to balance comedy with instruction. Lucy was quirky, but ultimately domestic. June Cleaver was graceful, supportive, and never out of place. Today's digital spaces carry the same DNA. YouTube moms, TikTok clean influencers, and self-care girlies all exist in a world where femininity is both aspirational and approachable, where the viewer is meant to feel both admiration and familiarity. Do you think we've really moved past the 1950s gender expectations, or have they just been rebranded in aesthetic packaging? Chapter 3, The Rise of the Relatable Creator and the Sad Girl Economy. Around the mid-2010s, something shifted dramatically in online culture. Aspiration gave way to relatability. The era of glossy influencers living in impossibly curated lives, complete with yacht selfies, designer closets, and green juice in Centauri, began to lose its shine. Audiences, especially Gen Z, became wary of perfection. The filters felt fake, the product placement felt forced. What people craved wasn't more glamour, it was realness, or at least a version of it that felt authentic. Enter the relatable creator. This new digital archetype didn't have it all figured out. She was awkward, anxious, sleep-deprived. She filmed from her messy room, made jokes about spiraling, and talked openly about therapy and burnout. Think Emma Chamberlain, who rose to YouTube fame not by flaunting wealth but embracing vulnerability, vlogging in oversized hoodies, oversharing in coffee-fueled monologues, and editing her videos with abrupt zooms and raw jump cuts. Her charm wasn't in her perfection, it was in her imperfection. She wasn't trying to be your idol, she was trying to be your friend. And brands took notice. What began as a countercultural movement quickly became another arm of the advertising machine. Marketers realized that relatability sells. Creators who shared their struggles, mental health issues, body image, financial anxiety drew massive engagement. And that engagement turned into influence, and influence, of course, turned into brand deals. Suddenly, sadness was marketable. Melancholy was monetizable. Being vulnerable wasn't just acceptable, it was strategic. This gave rise to what many now call the sad girl economy, a cultural and commercial landscape where feminine pain, especially when aestheticized, becomes a brandable asset. You can see it everywhere: the wistful lighting of Glossier ads, Lana Del Rey's tragic coquette persona, the tearful TikToks captioned with healing era or soft girl burnout. Emotional honesty, once marginalized or hidden, has become a form of aesthetic capital. But there's a tension here, because while vulnerability can foster community online, it's rarely just for catharsis, it's for content. Audiences expect creators to keep sharing their pain, their breakdowns, their real moments, but only in a way that's palatable, brand safe, and algorithm friendly. Emotional labor becomes performative, and the performance becomes currency. In this economy, sadness must be softly lit. Breakdowns are choreographed. Authenticity becomes just another filter. And for creators, this comes at a cost. Being relatable is no longer just about being honest, it's about being consistently vulnerable in ways that keeps people watching, but don't make them uncomfortable. There's little room for true privacy or messiness when your brand depends on looking like a beautifully broken mirror. And for audiences, there's the risk of blurring the line between empathy and consumption, turning someone's pain into a spectacle, even if it's unintentionally. You can see this commodified vulnerability in the rise of self-care and healing TikTok trends, like the everything shower, my Sunday reset, or the healing girl era. These aren't just routines, they're rituals made to soothe, structure, and sell. Each one accompanied by a clickable product, the perfect body scrub, the soothing candle, the pastel planner. It's all seamless fusion of productivity, therapy, and consumerism. The message is subtle but persistent. To fix your life, you need the right stuff. So do you think this hyper-curated vulnerability is empowering, or are we just romanticizing burnout and sadness? Chapter 4, Friendship as a Sales Funnel. Brands in the language of intimacy. At some point in the last decade, brands stopped acting like corporations and started acting like people. Messy, quirky, emotionally available people. If you ever scrolled through X and seen fast food chains throwing shade, or TikTok accounts run by social media interns dancing to trendy sounds, you've seen this shift in action. Remember when Wendy's started roasting customers with the sharp wit of a stand-up comedian? Or when Duolingo's owl mascot transformed from a language learning assistant into an unhinged bisexual chaos goblin on TikTok, making thirsty memes and snarky jokes in the comments. These weren't just viral moments, they were strategic plays in the modern branding handbook. In the past, brands maintain a tone of authority and professionalism. Now they want you to be your friend, or more specifically, your emotional, unstable, highly relatable friend who always knows what meme is trending. The logic is simple but effective. Professional feels distance, personal feels trustworthy, and in an era where traditional advertising is increasingly met with suspicion, or just outright ignored, brands are racing to adapt. The hard sell is dead. The soft sell, cloaked in self-deprecating humor and emotionally candor, is thriving. This is where the language of parasocial intimacy comes in. Brands have learned to mimic the tone of our favorite creators and friends, speaking in lowercase, using emojis, telling inside jokes, and referencing niche internet culture. Their posts aren't just about the product, they're about the vibe. They're not trying to convince you to buy something, they're trying to make you feel seen. If you relate to the joke, you'll relate to the brand, and if you relate to the brand, you'll trust it. And if you trust it, you'll buy it. Marketing expert Mark Schaefer coined the phrase, "the most human company wins," and brands have taken that to heart. But here's the critical caveat, that humanity is often simulated. The quirky tweet written by a copywriter, the heartfelt Instagram caption about mental health approved by legal. Even the seeming spontaneity of a TikTok duet or a comment reply is often run through a content calendar and brand guidelines. The result is a carefully curated illusion of authenticity, what we might call corporate cosplay as a friend. It's especially effective when brands lean into emotional topics. Take Topicals, the skincare brand that's built its identity around mental health, inclusivity, and self-love. Their founder regularly goes on Instagram Live to talk about acne, depression, and therapy, weaving personal antidotes into product recommendations. The vibe is intimate and genuine, like talking to a friend who happens to have great skincare tips. But make no mistake, this intimacy is also a sales strategy. The product isn't just about clearer skin, it's about emotional healing, confidence, and community. In this model, buying becomes a form of self-care. This is the core of emotional capitalism, selling not just products but feelings. When brands tell you, "we see you," or "we're here for you," it creates a feedback loop of affection and loyalty. But it also raises ethical questions. Is that message coming from a place of compassion or conversion? Is the brand genuinely trying to build community, or just cultivating attachment to increase customer lifetime value? And most of all, do we even care? Because when brands start to feel like our friends and creators feel like our sisters, it becomes difficult to recognize when emotional connection is being commodified. The blur between sincerity and strategy becomes not just marketing, it becomes culture. Have you ever felt like a brand really got you? Did it change how you saw them or what you bought? Chapter 5, the loneliness economy. Are we just buying connection? All of this, intimate influencers bearing their souls, brands crafting personalities that feel oddly comforting, content creators narrating their healing journeys over lo-fi beats, points to something much larger and more painful beneath the surface. We are lonely, deeply, collectively lonely. Loneliness today isn't just a fleeting emotion, it's a chronic condition. According to multiple studies, millennials and Gen Zs are experiencing unprecedented levels of social disconnection. This was already growing before COVID, but the pandemic escalated everything. Friendships atrophied, workplaces went remote, social lives migrated almost entirely online. Many people now live in urban high-rises where they don't know their neighbors, spend their days working alone from laptops, and maintain friendships primarily through likes, comments, and occasional memes. And the occasional meme direct message. Our communities have shifted from the tangible to the digital, from the local to the algorithm. In this vacuum of authentic connection, parasocial relationships have quietly slipped in to fill the emotional void. They're easy, low maintenance, and always on. You can tune into your favorite Twitch streamer at 2 a.m. and feel like there's someone there with you. You can watch a YouTuber make dinner while they talk about their anxiety and feel seen. You can scroll through the brand's meme page and think, wow, they really get me. It's not reciprocal, but it feels like it is, and sometimes that illusion is enough. But this isn't just a cultural phenomenon, it's also a market. Welcome to the loneliness economy, where connection has been commodified and packaged for consumption. It includes everything from ASMR channels that mimic soothing voices, to AI girlfriend apps that simulate romance, to YouTube vloggers who create entire emotional ecosystems around their followers. It also includes wellness brands that promise to be your safe space, coffee chains that get your vibe, and skincare companies that build entire campaigns around mental health. In this economy, brands don't just want to sell to you, they want to comfort you. And to be fair, it works. When you're lonely, even small interactions, especially ones that feel personalized, can trigger emotional responses. A familiar voice on a podcast, a Twitch streamer saying your username, a brand sending you a meme that feels eerily specific. These digital moments can feel like genuine intimacy, and that perceived connection drives engagement, brand loyalty, and ultimately sales. But it begs the question, at what cost? Because when the primary form of connection becomes commercial, the emotional terrain gets murky. Are we forming bonds because we truly feel understood? Or because we're being expertly targeted? Are we drawn to creators because of who they are, or because they know how to perform vulnerability in ways that hit the algorithm sweet spot? When our most intimate interactions are mediated by marketing teams and monetized through affiliate links, it becomes harder to know whether our feelings are organic or if they've been subtly engineered. And maybe most unsettling of all, do we even care? Because the reality is, a parasocial relationship, even a commercialized one, can still offer comfort. And for many people, that's better than nothing. When real-life friendships are fractured, dating feels exhausting, and family support is lacking. A familiar online presence can provide structure, reassurance, and even a sense of identity. In that way, parasocial bonds do serve a purpose. But they're also precarious because they rely on people and brands who have no obligation to love you back. When our most meaningful connections are intermediated by algorithms and monetized by corporations, are we still choosing them freely? Or are we just clinging to whatever warmth we can afford to buy? Do you think parasocial connections are harmful, or are they just a modern form of companionship from a generation growing up more isolated than ever? So what have we learned? From 1930s soap operas to TikTok story times, marketers have always understood one thing. People don't just want products, they want connection. And if you can package that connection in a way that feels personal, whether through a weepy vlog or snarky brand tweet, you can turn feelings into profit. But in the age of the parasocial economy, it's getting harder and harder to tell where our genuine emotions end and the marketing begins. We're not just buying things, we're buying into stories, relationships, and identities. And while that can be empowering, it can also make us vulnerable, especially when loneliness is bait and intimacy is the hook. So the next time a brand slides into your DMs or your favorite influencer shares a little too much, pause and ask, is this friendship or is it a funnel? So what do you think? Are parasocial relationships the future of connection, or do we need to reclaim our emotional labor from the market? Let me know in the comments below. I mean, it is weird nowadays because back in the day you would just call people on their landline or even just show up at your friend's house and knock on the door and say hello. But now it almost feels rude to pick up the phone and try to call someone. Now it's well, you should text them first to make sure they're available to talk. But back in the day when we didn't have text messages and cell phones, you would just call because that was the only way. So it's just such a weird world nowadays. And instead of people meeting up, they're oh, let's just all hang out on Zoom, or it's just so different. And I don't think we're ever going to go back to the way the things were. But I think even if you think back to the 70s and the 80s and stuff, even the 90s, just people were more social back then, I think, and would hang out more with each other. But everything has become so isolated, especially now when you can work from home with technology. You don't even need to work with all your coworkers. Everything can be done remotely. So it's just such a different world we live in. So let me know in the comments below, what are your thoughts on all of this? I think all this type of marketing has been here for a while. Even if you think of Mad Men and how they would kind of market towards a woman and her emotional trigger points to try to get her to buy nylons or skincare. So it's always been there. It's just a different version now. All right, thanks for watching.